Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Linda Matteoli of the Origins Incubator, where I help physicians open up and start their own cash-based membership practice. So today we're going to be talking about the appointment that we call the foundational assessment, and how to best execute this appointment. Now, the reason that this appointment is so important is because it really lays the foundation for how you work as a practice and what your patient can expect from signing up to be a part of your practice. And so it is when you present it during the discovery call or when the patient calls the office, is that it's the initial deep dive appointment. So how I typically describe it is, when they ask about your practice and how it works, you would discuss that kind of from a macro level, and then you would kind of orient them. So you would say, the next step is the first appointment is a foundational assessment, and it is really a deep dive into your symptoms, your diseases, whatever you're experiencing. It's a 90-minute appointment with myself. And if you do include this, say it. So I also include a follow-up with our health coach and nutritionist, as well as our therapist. So it's a 90-minute appointment with myself, as well as a follow-up with our health coach and nutritionist, as well as our therapist. So it's actually 3 appointments in one. And the purpose of this appointment is to really take the time to peel back the layers and figure out what might be driving some of your symptoms over the long term, and how do we recreate balance within both your external and internal environments. So that's kind of the overview. And then you can go on to say how this works is you would invest in the appointment, which you would say the price, whether it's $495, $695, whatever it is that you have decided. So the price of the appointment is $695. Once that money has been invested, then you receive an email and you fill out a lot of questionnaires as well as information about yourself. This is so I can have a really good idea of what has been occurring for you. So when I order labs, then I know what to include. If you've recently had labs done, you're welcome to upload those to the portal as well, so I can review them at the time of the appointment. Once the labs are resulted, you'll get the labs done, and once they are resulted, then you'll come in for the appointment. Now, that's kind of what you would say to the patient as far as moving through that process. Now, for you as a physician, as a provider, what's important to realize is that this appointment, you are really kind of integrating and educating what you have learned about this patient. So it's an overlap and an assimilation of both objective and subjective data. So the subjective data is going to be their questionnaires, their history, just kind of how they experience their daily life, what's going on for them. And then their labs are going to be that objective data. So I'm going to move through like step by step how I conduct the foundational assessment. So I use the program Living Matrix because I find it really, really helpful for them to see that the functional medicine matrix and the interplay of the connection between the symptoms. So I have that up on the screen when they come in. So if you have a brick and mortar, then I cast from my laptop up to a TV screen that's like over my desk so they can see it. And I encourage them to bring in a family member, a friend, somebody that they can kind of help, process everything that we're going to talk about if they choose. So that's welcome and encouraged. So that's up on the screen. If you have a virtual practice, then I recommend you having 2 screens. So you can have a monitor, to the left of your laptop. So on your laptop, when you share your screen via whatever like telehealth, modality you have, then on to the side of it, you can kind of like type and take notes while they're looking at their matrix the whole time. So they come in and that is up. And you welcome them for coming and tell them that you're looking forward to working with them, and then just lay out what to expect, because they probably haven't had a 90-minute appointment before, and they might be feeling a little bit nervous of like, what can I expect in this appointment? So I find that people are able to like listen and calm down a little bit if they know what to expect. So I'll say, this is what to expect from this appointment today. First, we're going to go through your questionnaires. We're going to go through your symptoms. I'm going to explain to you what this living matrix means, what this matrix means, and how it relates to you. Then we're going to go through your history. So I'm going to be writing down everything that's kind of happened in your life, because your health history is your life story, essentially. So I'm going to be taking notes and asking questions to clarify some things and to just kind of hear your story in your own words. Then we're going to go over your labs. So I have your labs right here, and I'm really looking forward to reviewing all of that and what that means. Then we're going to bring it all together. So we're going to take the information that I have learned from your story and your history, as well as the data that I have from these initial foundational labs, and we're going to create a plan. This plan is going to be foundational in nature. We're going to be talking about nutrition, sleep, stress, the nervous system, exercise and movement, as well as baseline foundational supplementations to help support the healing process at a foundational level. So this is going to be a personalized, individualized plan based on this appointment. When I'm finished, I will discuss with you the next steps. So if you choose to do a bit of a deeper dive in advanced testing and working with me long-term over the next year, then I'll discuss with you exactly what tests I'm going to be recommending and what that process will look like. If you choose that you want to stay with these foundational assessments and not move forward at this time, that is okay too. I'm going to be recommending, if there's any labs that I think that should be repeated in 3 months or so. And it's going to be recommended and advised that you follow up with your primary care doctor in 3 months from now to kind of, keep the process going. You have the opportunity to move forward with the membership in 2 months. So if you don't move forward in 2 months, then we kind of have to repeat this process all over again, but you can certainly have some time to think about it and decide what you want to do. So it might take you about, 5-7 minutes to describe all of that, but that is just super important so they can be like, oh, okay, now I can be present, I can discuss what's occurring for me and what might happen. And then you just start. So I normally start with the medical symptom questionnaire and what that means, what that rating means. And then I go straight to the matrix and I kind of bring in their symptoms. So say the energy node has a lot of points there, then I discuss kind of what the mitochondria does, what it means, what they might be experiencing, like what dysfunction the mitochondria look like. So I go around the whole matrix and I kind of pull from their questionnaires about what all that means. Once I'm done with that matrix, then I kind of hand them the floor. And I say, okay, now at this time, I would love to hear your story in your own words. Some people start from early childhood birth, and you can compartmentalize into like elementary school, junior high, high school, college, young adulthood now. Sometimes it's easier to kind of think about your life like that. And I give them permission to, no matter how they're feeling, I'll say, some patients come in here and say, I've never felt well. Like I was sick all the time as a kid. I never had a lot of energy. And this has been an ongoing problem for me my whole life. And I'll say, and other people say, I've had a really overall great, healthy, happy life. It's just been since blank that it feels like the wheels have come off. So sometimes I give those two kind of more extreme examples to give people permission that it's okay and that you have the capacity to kind of hold space for them no matter where they are in the spectrum. So then you listen to their story and you actively listen, you ask clarifying questions. So you're at this point in the appointment, you're not like explaining things and you're not teaching, you're not doing anything like that. You're just kind of like listening for feeling words, I say. So yeah, that sounds like that would be really hard, or I can see that would have been very difficult for you, or wow, that's amazing that you overcame something so difficult. Like just kind of words that let them know that you are here and you're listening. And at this point, you're not trying to fix whatever it is that they are going through or have been through. But you're kind of taking notes. So that's the subjective portion of your note. You know, you're kind of creating their timeline, and you might be taking notes about like reminders of like, oh, they might be a good candidate for a stool analysis or an adrenal test or whatever. Like you're kind of starting to kind of think about the process. Then once they're done with their history, I always say, you know, is there anything else that you would have me know about you? Is there anything else that you would like me to know? And I think that that's a good transition, because they're finishing their part of the story. A lot of times that history timeline portion might take 45 minutes. And for some people it's emotional, and they've never really sat there and stated their whole story in one sitting before. So that's a way that I have found is a good way to kind of have closure to that portion of the appointment. Is there anything else you would have me know about you? And if they're like, no, I think that that's it, then I would say, okay, thank you so much. Like that really helps me have a good idea of what you've been through, like you as a human being, like what you've been through in this life so far. And now I have a lot of really good information to interpret your labs with. And then that's a good transition into the labs. So I have the labs, if it's an in-person appointment, I have the labs printed out so I can kind of take notes on it. And then if it's virtual, I obviously share my screen, pull up the labs, and then I also have like again, like a second screen. You kind of just need two screens throughout this process. And then I go through the labs, and when I go through the labs, I use it very much as like a educational piece. So I start to kind of tie in, you know, if there's nutritional deficiencies, like say their homocysteine is high, I discuss like what that means, like what that might mean for methylation. What does methylation mean in terms of things that they can control in terms of their external environment and detox, and what that means for B12 and folate. And then we look at their B12 and their folate levels and just kind of see like, we're working to connect the dots. While I'm doing that, a lot of the times I'm starting to kind of create like if they need certain supplements to replace that, like say their zinc is borderline low and their homocysteine is high and their B vitamins are low, I'll use that opportunity to discuss a certain multivitamin that has like the methylated folate and the methylated vitamins in it, as well as the minerals. You know, you're starting to create their plan a little bit so they can see it, so they can understand like why you're recommending what you're doing. So a lot of times during the lab explanation, I'm like starting to kind of brain dump a little bit and show them my thought process. And then from there, I go right into kind of their full foundational plan. So if I haven't already through their history, I'll ask them what a typical day is like, because a lot of times that's my data to create their plan. So my foundational assessment plan includes nutrition recommendations, movement, sleep, stress, and then baseline supplements, and then follow-up advanced labs. So I'll just ask them, like, instead of saying, you know, I recommend a low inflammatory elimination diet, I'll first ask them like, you know, I need to know where I'm starting from, because the last thing you want to do is recommend something that they've like already really worked hard on and tried, and then that's going to make them not feel heard or understood. So I'll say, you know, like, bring me through a typical day. And this doesn't take as much time as I think sometimes we think it does. But I just say, you know, what time do you wake up? What do you eat and drink throughout the day? And when do you go to bed? And then I'll just kind of write it all down, and I'll say, you know, I wake up at X amount of time and this is what I have for breakfast. And then I typically don't eat again till 3. And then this is what it is. And then I'll have this dinner, and I'm in bed by 10, but I normally don't fall asleep till midnight, like something like that. And then you can take that information and discuss, you know, so say they're super tired and anxious, then you can use that information to talk about blood sugar regulation and how it's important that we don't have these dips and spikes of blood pressure throughout the day, because that can feel like anxiety, that can feel like fatigue. So you can start to talk about, from a nutrition perspective, we not only need to make sure that we're not giving you inflammatory foods, but also like the timing is very important. So you're just kind of using what they have told you about themselves, as well as the symptoms and how your plan is kind of bridging that. Because I think a lot of times patients kind of get a little dissociated in terms of like, they might have a little bit of understanding, but they may not know exactly how their daily choices are impacting how they're feeling. And that's what this level of the treatment is about, is really creating awareness around their life and their choices and how they're feeling. So I do the same thing for stress, for movement, for sleep, kind of moving from what they're already doing. And they might already be doing something really amazing. Like, you don't need to recommend something. Like if somebody's like, I turn my phone off, I turn my screens off by 8 o'clock, I'm in bed by 9, I journal before bed, I do some gratitude, and I sleep like a rock, and I'm up between 5 and 6. Like congratulations, like fantastic. Like I have nothing to add there. Like keep doing it. So my point is like, you don't need to kind of just like go through just recommendations based on what the ideal person should do. Like make it personal to like what they're already doing, and commend them and congratulate them when they're doing something that's really working for them. And then you go through. So when I'm to the supplement plan part, I make it very clear why I'm recommending the supplements. So like suboptimal vitamin D or vitamin D deficiency, and then you're putting like the 2,000 to 5,000 units for X amount of time. Like you're very clear about the why of the recommendations. And the reason being is that this appointment, you don't know necessarily if they're going to move forward with the membership with you or not at this point. Like they might be here for this one-time deep dive to gain some information about themselves and some foundational recommendations, but they really may not have the resources or the time or the willingness to kind of go through like a deep dive membership with you. So you want it to be a way that you can have appropriate handoff to their medical team. So if their medical team sees, the primary care sees what they're on and sees their recent labs, they kind of are like, okay, I understand why these are recommended. I always let them know that like if there's a finding that is abnormal, I point that out and say, these labs, if you don't follow up with me, like these labs should be repeated in like 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is that you recommend. Make sure that they are clear on that. And I also make it clear, regardless, that they follow up with their primary care doctor in 90 days. Another point about the labs is one of the reasons that I have these labs ordered prior to the foundational assessment and prior to accepting them in the membership is that you will come across people who are just in the acute phase of an illness. And for me and my practice, I think it's appropriate for those patients to be stabilized. So say they have thrombocytopenia, or say their creatinine is elevated, or whatever it is on your labs that's just a red flag, or an A1C that's through the roof. It's just kind of like, okay, like this needs to be medically managed with your medical team. And then once you're stabilized, then we can kind of pick up the ball and start really pulling back the layers of root cause. But I think for me, that's a really important barrier. So I'm constantly reviewing labs as they come in, calling patients even before the foundational assessment. If there's something abnormal, if there's nothing abnormal, I wait to see them at the foundational assessment. That's no problem. But especially if there's something acute, because we have caught things that needed to be addressed, somewhat efficiently, in the conventional medicine world. And I think that's just an important distinction to make as you move through this process. So the foundational assessment is super powerful. It's one of my most favorite appointments to do, because there's a lot of education, there's a lot of assimilation of knowledge, and patients are starting to really understand the connections between their environment, their thoughts, their nervous system, and their labs and how they're feeling. So it's just kind of creating awareness around it and just, starting the journey. And then I end the appointment with, if you choose to work with us over the next year, these are, based on based on your, IBS symptoms, as well as your fatigue and your nutrient deficiencies, I'd like to start with a food sensitivity and gut workup. This is what these tests would look like. I don't go into it in detail at that point because it's just super overwhelming. Like, you're not going to talk about, and this is how you do the test, and this is where you send it off, and it's like too much. So I just say, like, I would like to identify any food sensitivities that you have, as well as take a closer look into your gut. And we'll go through that treatment within the membership and repeat and kind of so on and so forth. So that's as an overview, that's how I conduct the foundational assessment. Again, it's one of my most favorite appointments. I really enjoy them, and I hope that was helpful for you. Thanks a lot.